Hello, this is Peter Falk, and you're listening to the Columbo Files on the Ludic Lounge, hosted by Antonicus Maximus and John Soares.
Hello and welcome to another episode, or file, I should say. That's how I should do it. Another file in the Columbo Files, brought to you by the Ludic Lounge. I am your co-host, John Soares, and with me, as always, is the man, the myth, the booty himself, the legendary Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV. Bid a fond how do you do to our listeners, Anthony.
A fond how do you do to our listeners, and welcome to season number 2, John.
A momentous occasion. We got through the first season. We ranked that first season.
We did. And we thank you all for sticking with us, and hope you are as excited as we are to talk about tonight's episode. I would say, John, that it's a totally good episode.
Agreed. But before we get into the episode talk, Anthony, we got a review.
What?
We got a 5-star review on iTunes.
Comer?
Courtesy, yes, indeed. Courtesy of user Joyster110. They gave some fine notes saying that we've done a lot of research for each episode, and we throw in all kind of nuggets of information about the actors, Columbo, the sets, and so on. They go on to say that they listened to 3 other Columbo podcasts, Anthony, all the way through. So that's 69 episodes. And
nice.
Thought that there wasn't anything more to say. And we're adding all kinds of info that this listener had never heard before, didn't know. And they also really enjoy our 3-act breakdown. So I just want to say thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate your patronage, and we hope you enjoy. And, stick with us for the remaining 8-9 seasons that we have left.
Absolutely. And John so eloquently put it, and I just want to give a personal thank you to Joyster110. And along with that, if you want to reach out to us at the end of every episode, as you all know, if you're listening to this, but every episode is somebody's first episode, John. So if you're listening to this at the end of our Columbo File episodes, we have Peter Falk himself, Limited Fake Peter Falk himself, tell you where you can reach us and let us know how you like it, or if you hate it. But at the end of every episode, he will tell you where to reach out to us. Tell us if you like it. Tell us if you hate it. But we really would like if you tell us if you like us.
Yes, we just crave love and affection.
Now, John, speaking of craving love and affection, I didn't think I could crave a better episode to start off season 2 than this particular episode, John.
You know what, Anthony? I'm in complete agreement. This is a dynamite episode, and it was something that ABC or NBC, I should say. ABC comes much later. NBC really wanted them to pull out the stops for this debut, and honestly, I think they did. So, Anthony, I think it's time to get into our cast and crew and episode trivia for this week. What say you?
What I say, John, is that, first of all, this episode premiered September 17th, 1972, and the main antagonist, John, was John Cassavetes as Alex Benedict.
Now, we went into John Cassavetes a little bit in our Peter Falk retrospective episode a little while back, but we're going to do it again because, like Anthony said, every episode of Columbo Files might be someone's first. So we'll just give everybody a little bit background. So John Cassavetes is an actor, director, screenwriter, and is considered a pioneer of American independent cinema, as he used the funding that he was able to, the money he got as an actor and money he was able to fundraise on his own in order to finance films that he wrote, directed, and often starred in. Some fun facts about John Cassavetes, Anthony. He started acting in 1956, and in 1956, he started teaching an alternative to method acting. Did you know that?
I did not know that, John. What was his alternative?
Well, he co-founded this alternative to method acting with his friend Burt Lane in New York City, and it's called the Cassavetes Lane approach. Here, the focus is character creation rather than backstory or narrative requirements, and that serves as the basis of the performance. They held that acting would be considered an expression of creative joy and exuberance, with emphasis on the character's creations of masks in the process of interacting with other characters. So it's, in a way, it's like, I'm going to butcher the concept, but it's like everybody has a face that they present to different people as they go about their day. There's a private face that they have at home, when they're by themselves or with a significant other, and then there's other faces that people put on when they're out in public and interacting with the community at large. Yeah, what's funny is that he and Lane also did an audition, I think, in front of Lee Strasberg, who was the proponent of method acting, and they improvised an entire interaction, and he thought it was something that was written.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that speaks to the quality of what Cassavetes is able to do as a performer. His first starring role, at least major starring role, was in 1957, Anthony, in the movie Edge of the City, opposite Sidney Poitier.
Yes, as Axel Nordman.
Now that's a name. He also had a guest role in what I believe is a TV show called Decoy, which was the Beverly Garland created NYPD female undercover detective show.
Ooh.
Yes. He also had the lead, and this, honestly, Anthony, I think is going to become your favorite show ever. He starred as the lead character, Johnny Staccato.
Oh, I was hoping you'd bring this up because I brought it up, and it looks great. Tell us and the audience about it, John.
Yeah, so Johnny Staccato is a show that ran from 1959 to 1960, where John Cassavetes played a jazz pianist who worked as a private investigator.
Of course he did.
That's just like the 50s and 60s. They'll just like jam anything up against a PI concept. Also, in addition to acting, Anthony, he directed 5 episodes.
Of course he did. And again, like he threw out one of the things when I was doing my research, John, and again, being a pioneer of independent film that he was, just how many directing credits he got and he was doing is outstanding. But John, we mentioned Johnny Staccato. I also want to mention that he starred in a lot of TV and movie films. A few of the ones that I'd like to name. And folks, again, because every episode, somebody's first episode, when I say things I recognize him from, I think of like the layman, things that typically speaking, you would know, the popular culture would know. So he was in episodes of Rawhide. He played in the movie The Killers as Johnny North in 1964, John.
Which is a remake of a Burt Lancaster movie from the 40s that is based off of a Ernest Hemingway short story, if I recall correctly.
I'm going to take your word on that, John, because obviously you did a lot deeper research than I.
Well, I only recognize the Killer. If I recall, this version of The Killers also has Lee Marvin in it. You know, we learned about Lee Marvin in law school, funny enough.
Really?
Yeah. He never married his girlfriend. And they were together so long, she was pretty much considered his wife. So there was an issue regarding distribution of his assets when he died. Oh. So it's a wills and trust case that we had to learn about. Marvin versus Marvin. I think
that sounds way less interesting than I thought it was going to be.
Sorry. Just fun little tidbits.
I thought it was going to be something like he murdered a man just to watch him die, and then there was some like legalities behind it where they couldn't prosecute.
Well, if anybody would have murdered a man just to watch him die, it would have been Lee Marvin.
Exactly. The name alone, Lee Marvin. But John, we're getting sidetracked.
Yes.
Did you know that John Cassavetes also starred in episodes of Burke's Law, The Virginian, The Dirty Dozen, the film Dirty Dozen?
Yeah.
As Victor Franco, John.
Freaking Victor Franco. That movie is insane.
When's the last time you watched that movie?
Oh, like maybe 4 years ago.
Okay, so it's a lot more recent than but even because it's been, I'd say, close to 10 years for me. Even when I saw John Cassavetes' face, I was like, isn't that the guy? I know he's the guy from The Dirty Dozen. So that just speaks multitudes of how great he was in that film, in my opinion.
Yes. He was also in, and I have to mention that because I grew up with this because my dad was a fan of the show. He was also had spots in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and probably one of his other more famous acting credits, he played the husband character in Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, he did, John, in the year 1968, and that character's name was Guy Woodhouse.
Thank you. I didn't have that written down. I just know he's the husband.
I'm here to pick you up when you fall down.
As always. I'd like to talk about John Cassavetes as a director a little bit, though.
Absolutely.
So his movies are very distinct because he employed an actor-centered approach which privileged character examination and small feelings over traditional storytelling or stylized production values. He tended to prefer an improvisational cinema verite aesthetic. I'm stealing all this from Wikipedia. So he wanted to get to some kind of truth, some realistic truth with his films and his characters. He again from Wikipedia, his films aimed to capture small feelings that were often repressed by the studio system in Hollywood, and wanted to do intimate character examination, and didn't want to fall back onto plot or backstory or stylization. And more often than not, his films were involving difficult characters who had inner desires that aren't easily understood, and you could not simply just put a simple label on them or have a narrative explanation for their behavior. There was something more complex to it. The reason I wanted to talk about his directing is that he worked very closely with a small group of people repeatedly on his movies. Often his films would star his real life wife, Gena Rowlands, as a lead or a co-lead. Peter Falk was in a lot of his movies as well. His friend Ben Gazzara and Seymour Cassel were also recurring players in Cassavetes' film. His first film was called Shadows. I believe it was released in 1957 and then made its way to the States in 59. It was independently financed, won the Critics Award at the Venice Film Festival, and is about race relations during the Beat Generation years in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah. His second film was a movie called Faces that starred his wife, and it was nominated and I believe won for Best Original Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Supporting Actress. His first film with Falk was a movie called Husbands, where Cassavetes, Falk, and Ben Gazzara played husbands who were trying to, get through a situation in their life at the time, midlife crisis, as you will. Minnie and Moskovitz was another one that he did with his wife, Gena Rowlands, and Seymour Cassel. This is the movie I first heard Cassavetes about, A Woman Under the Influence. It stars Gena Rowlands and Peter Falk as a couple, where Gena Rowlands is a woman who is going through a serious psychological downturn, and it netted her Best Actress nomination and a Best Director nom for Cassavetes. He did a couple more films: The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, again with Ben Gazzara, Opening Night, Gloria, Love Streams, and he closed out his directing career with a movie called Big Trouble, which he publicly disowned before he died because the studio had significant interference with his vision, and he came in after a previous director had left, so it wasn't really his per se.
So that makes sense, because his last credit that I put him was for Love Streams in '84, so I guess that makes sense if he disowned his work for that one. But John, let's move on to Blythe Danner as Janice Benedict in tonight's episode.
Now, Janice Benedict is not our victim, thankfully. We'll get to our victim soon enough. But Blythe Danner is, like Cassavetes and Falk, she's one of these historic pillars in Hollywood, I'd say.
Absolutely, John. I mean, dating back, and I'll get to what I know her best from, and maybe the younger audience who listens to us will probably know her best from. But going all the way back, she started back in the year 1968, John. One of the credits that I put her down for is most memorable. She was in To Kill a Clown as Lily Fleischer in 1972. She played in 1776, which was an American Revolution movie. In the year 1972, she played Martha Jefferson.
That's right.
She played in a TV series in 1973 as a character Amanda Bonner in the TV show Adam's Rib. She starred in episodes of MASH, Saint Elsewhere, Tattingers as Hillary Tattinger from 1988 to 89. Boy.
That's a lot of stuff, and I got even more stuff. Blythe Danner has such a very long career, and she, from what I understand, she's still working. She won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards, Anthony, for Best Supporting Actress in a Drama Series for a TV show called Huff that ran from 2004 to 2006. She played Izzy Huffstadt. Yep. She won the Tony Award for Best Actress in the stage production Butterflies Are Free. She was nominated twice for Guest Actress Primetime Emmy Award for her performances in Will and Grace as Marilyn Truman.
Yep, and I have that noted. But John, did you know, and this was a surprise to me, she starred in the movie To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
And I watched that movie not too long ago.
Yeah, she played character Beatrice. And again, it was one of those things. She wasn't a super major character from I haven't watched the movie in about 5-10 years, to be quite honest with you. But From what I remember, apparently she played character Beatrice. The movie itself, I don't know if it holds up, John, so you'd have to speak to that, but
it does.
was one of the first movies that comes to popular culture mind, speaking of men in an alternate lifestyle, which is what I appreciate about this particular film.
Yeah, great performances all around in that movie, from Patrick Swayze to Snipes and John Leguizamo. It's honestly, and yeah, I would probably feel a little bit different about Blythe Danner's performance now, because now that I'm a little bit aware of who she is as an actress. So when I watched it, I was just like, I didn't think anything of her character, just in context of, oh, that's Blythe Danner. It was more just like, thinking of the character. The character was great. It was a great story, but if you would have asked me if that was Blythe Danner back then, I wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, and that's totally fair enough, John. And speaking of, she was in that. One of her most memorable roles of recent cinema history is she was in Meet the Parents and the subsequent sequels, Meet the Fockers and Little Fockers, as Dina Burns. There you go. You can tell that I pay attention to this movie. Who was the mother-in-law to Ben Stiller in those films.
She is married to Robert De Niro in those movies, if I recall.
Yeah, and it's essentially, it's a comedy, but it's one of those where like late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like awkward comedy, when there's just a series of awkward things happen. And it's kind of funny, but it's not my cup of tea when it comes to humor, to be quite frank, which is why I couldn't pronounce Dina Bynes.
And didn't again. Dina Burns.
Fair enough.
She was in a few Woody Allen movies, Another Woman, Alice, and Husbands and Wives, in addition to the movies that you mentioned, Anthony. She was in the X-Files movie, the first one.
Oh, that's right.
And she had a voice role in Howl's Moving Castle.
I was about to say, I was going to drop that on you, John. That completely took me by surprise.
A couple more TV stuff. She had a part in an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Ooh.
2.5
I am the Crypt Keeper.
I don't have a Crypt Keeper. I'm sorry. I could do Adam West as a Crypt Keeper.
Ooh, please.
Good evening, citizens. It is I, the Crypt Keeper. That's all I got.
Perfect.
She also was in episodes of Medium, Nurse Jackie, and will be upcoming in new episodes of American Gods.
Yes, I did see that. I have personally not seen the American Gods TV adaptation, but I have read the book.
I have seen the first season and read the book.
Excellent.
And I stopped watching the show because I'm a Brian Fuller devotee, so I'm not going to, he got booted off the show for creative differences. So did I.
But John, someone who did not get booted off tonight's episode was Mryna Loy as Lizzie Felding, as I'm going to further refer to her as is director mother-in-law.
I agree. But one last thing before we move on to Mryna Loy. Did you know, Blythe Danner's children, or one of them at least?
Like personally or professionally?
Probably professionally. Blythe Danner is the mother of Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh.
Yeah. Her husband, Bruce Paltrow, was a noted TV and film director and producer. At the time of filming this episode, Anthony, she is 5 months pregnant with Gwyneth Paltrow. Ain't that something?
Wow.
Now, again, that's according to IMDb trivia, so just take it with a grain of salt.
I know, but I literally had no words. I'm going to have to edit this short, to shorten my stunned silence.
And what's even funnier is that now that I know she's Gwyneth Paltrow's mother, I watched the episode. It's like, how did I not see it?
Yeah, now that you mention it, my mind is reeling because you can actually see a lot of Gwyneth Paltrow's face in her performance.
And voice. I hear it in the voice. It threw me for a loop. But anyway, Mryna Loy, Anthony.
John, Mryna Loy had so much work dating all the way back to 1925 that I could not physically fit into a Word document without it going to like 25 pages easily.
I agree, and I can do a short summary of that for you. She was in the silent era, Anthony, and that's why there's so much stuff.
Yes, she was not in the talkies, as they lovingly or did not lovingly refer to speaking movies.
Well, she was at a certain point, but between the silent film era and the talkies, she was typically typecast in exotic roles, and she usually played a vamp or a woman of Asian descent. So she was kind of just basically, for lack of a better term, she was eye candy, meant to be exotic eye candy.
But she did have dancing skills, John.
That she did. Tell us about it.
She did have quite. I don't have her like where she got her training from and all that fun stuff, but essentially in a lot of the roles she played like you mentioned, John, vamps, flappers, etc., exotic roles, etc. But she was of the very creative mind of doing a lot of great dancing roles, and majority of all of these roles, when I was scrolling through her very, very lucrative IMDb page, a lot of them, again, it was like dancer A or dancer B or whatever have you. So just goes to show you like how classically trained she was, and not just acting, but in also the art of dance.
Agreed. Now, her career did change direction when she starred in this 1934 classic, which, if I recall, is I have the book right in front of me. She starred opposite William Powell in the adaptation of the Dashiell Hammett detective novel The Thin Man as Nora Charles, to William Powell's Nick Charles. They were Nora and Nick Charles, a pair of smart-talking, hard-drinking, essentially private eyes.
Of course, because of course it's Dashiell Hammett, so of course they have to be PIs.
Yes, but part of the charm is the witty banter between Nick and Nora Charles. She would go on to reprise the role of Nora Charles for another 5 movies.
Oh,
so I believe there are like maybe 5 or 6 Thin Man movies.
Well, I'll be. And speaking of reprising roles, John, she starred in the original Cheaper by the Dozen and reprised the role in the sequel Bells on Their Toes in 1950 and 1952.
I have a fun fact, though.
I love fun facts, but before you give me the fun fact, I want to say that she played Mrs. Lillian Gilbreth.
Thank you, Anthony. She also starred in a movie called Airport 1975.
Yes, she did, and we talked about this film a while ago.
Yes, and Lady in Waiting in Airport 1975. Lady in Waiting star Susan Clark is also in the show. In that, and I would be remiss to not mention our friend of the show, Charlton Heston.
Now, John, what did Charlton Heston sound like in that film?
Hello, this is Charlton Heston. I'm back to comment on the Columbo show. I was in movies once, but now I'm dead. Why am I here? Take me away.
I don't know what I've heard that impression 1,000 times, but I've never heard you say I was in movies. That just tickled the I almost cursed there and lost the E subsequently, but that just tickled you know what out of me.
I know. Imagine if Tony Curtis did it, but I won't do that.
Oh, no, because I won't be able to continue.
TV-wise, most notably that I was able to recognize, she was in episodes of The Virginian, Ironside, and did a whole mess of TV movies. But apart from her film career, Anthony, she was very involved with the war effort by the time the Second World War evolved to include American involvement. She all but abandoned her acting career to focus on the war effort and spent majority of her time working with the Red Cross. And Anthony, this makes me love her so much. She was so fiercely outspoken against Hitler that her name appeared on his blacklist, resulting in any film she was in being banned from Germany.
Good for her.
Because, like Mryna Loy, here at the Columbo Files and the Ludic Lounge cast, we say, go to hell, Nazis. We don't like you. You're pieces of crap.
Thank you for making it to where we can still keep our E, John.
Yes,
I feel a lot stronger, and if I were to give that little PSA, we would have lost our E.
Yeah, I know. She never received any kind of Academy nomination, but she did receive an honorary Academy Award in recognition of her life's work, both on screen and off. She served as an assistant to the director of the military and naval welfare for the Red Cross during the Second World War, and was a member at large of the U.S. Commission to UNESCO. So she was a very noted humanitarian and was, very influential in the war effort. So our hats off to you, Mryna Loy. Anthony, do you have anything else to add about Miss Loy?
Nope, just thank her for her service from way back when. John, moving on to the murder victim of tonight's episode, Anjanette Comer as Jennifer Wales.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce her name either.
I just went for it.
I was going for Anjanette Comer.
Okay, that works.
She was cast often as mysterious or exotic characters. Based off the thighs she shows in the show, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, fair enough. Episodes such as Gunsmoke, Bonanza. She starred in the movie, and she's most notable for Guns of San Sebastian as Canetta in the year 1968.
Yeah, and she was essentially doing something that she did in an earlier movie called The Appaloosa, where she played the love interest opposite Marlon Brando and John Saxon, who some of our fans should remember as one of the fighters in Enter the Dragon.
Absolutely. Well known and well put. And John, now that you mentioned Marlon Brando, one thing I forgot to mention about the star of tonight's episode, Mr. John Cassavetes, is early on in his acting career, he was compared a lot to Marlon Brando just because of his look, his acting style, and I just forgot to mention that. But now that you mentioned Brando, it's coming to mind.
Thank you, my son.
Get out of here.
I come from the planet Krypton to give you my thanks, my son.
Oh my god. All right, moving on from limited fame.
But to get back to my point, in the Appaloosa, she played a Mexican-American woman, and she then did that again in the Guns of San Sebastian. She was also in a movie called Banning. I don't have anything else about Banning. But,
fair enough. She also starred in The Fire Chasers as Toby Collins in 1971. She starred in father of the show, father of one of the co-hosts' favorite show, Mannix, in an episode or so. She also starred in Lepke as Bernice Meyer in 1975, which I mentioned this, John, because it has a Murder, Inc. connection that we talked about. Essentially, the premise of Lepke in the year 1975 takes a page out of the Murder, Inc. movie that we talked about in Peter Falk's Soul episode that we discussed, I guess, 2 episodes now, an episode ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Who knows? And essentially, it follows a lot of the same plot as Murder, Inc. It's talking about the same group of gangsters and the same crime syndicate. So to me, it just seemed like it was a remake or reboot or something of the like. But again,
taking the same amount of information and just doing a new take on it.
Yeah. And again, if I'm wrong, loyal listeners, please let me know how incorrect I am on that. John.
That's why we have an email.
Absolutely. She also started episodes of SWAT, Barnaby Jones, The Practice in 1999, and finished her acting career in the year 2011.
With A Bird of the Air, that a drama romance movie, if I recall.
Correct, John. And now let's move forward to James Olson as Paul Rifkin in tonight's episode.
Actually, I have a few more things about Miss Comer, if I may be so bold.
Damn, we're so rusty.
I know. We go 2 weeks and it all goes right to hell. She earned an Emmy nomination for outstanding performance in a supporting role in the crime legal drama Arrest and Trial. She was also in episodes of the legal drama The Practice.
Yep.
And I just wanted to say this because I just love the title. She was in episodes of Jake and the Fat Man, Anthony.
I did see that. I didn't include it, though.
I had to, just because I wanted to say that.
It is an excellent title.
So, moving on to James Olson, right?
Yep, to James Olson playing character Paul Rifkin tonight. He started working back in 1956, John. And such roles and shows, and again, I'm talking, this man did not starve for work because he was in a lot of TV, ladies and gentlemen, and every one in and between. He was in Have Gun Will Travel, Route 66 Connection again, John, The Defenders, The Virginian, the Andromeda Strain movie, where he played Dr. Mark Hall in the year 1971.
That is correct.
He also played in episodes of Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Ironside, Police Story, The FBI, Mannix, Kung Fu, the TV spinoff of All in the Family, John, Maude.
It's Maud.
And then there's Maude. He played Senator Bob Myers in Maude in a couple episodes in 75. He also starred in Barnaby Jones, The Streets of San Francisco.
Did he wear a flower in his hair?
No, I think that was, I want to say Kirk Douglas, but that's not the joke.
Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas.
Keaton Douglas.
There we go. Also starred in an episode of Wonder Woman and The Bionic Woman. And John, he starred in the original Battlestar Galactica in the year 1978.
Hell yes, son.
God, what a time to be alive. Hawaii Five-0. He also starred in the movie The Schwarzenegger Vehicle, John. I don't know if you've heard of that little-known actor in the movie Commando.
Yeah, he was in Commando with me, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I played a Commando, yeah. Hello, I'm here to talk about Columbo too.
Mr. Arnold, what was his character name?
I don't know. I was too busy with mates.
He played Major General Franklin Kirby. God.
Yeah, that guy, yeah.
Thank you. Arnold Schwarzenegger, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm so sorry.
And he finished in the year 1990 with, of course, John, the TV vehicle Murder, She Wrote.
That is correct. He was also in Jake and the Fat Man too, Anthony.
Yes, but again, I skipped over that.
I'm not going to let it go. I'm not letting it go.
I don't blame you. Now, John, moving on to one of the very, very minor characters in tonight's episode, James McKeon as William. That's what I got him as William. He started back in 66. He started Mannix, Hawaii Five-0, Dragnet, Perry Mason, essentially all of the rebooted Perry Mason films in like the 80s, 90s, etc. As Lieutenant Brock. He starred in many episodes of Matlock as Lieutenant Frank Daniels, and that's where I recognized him from.
Matlock.
Yes, because I watched a lot of Matlock growing up.
So
John.
much. Yes, Anthony.
I am so excited to talk about our next minor character.
Even if he's only in this episode for literally probably 5 minutes.
Not even 5 minutes. I would gather like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm talking about Mr. Miyagi himself, Pat Morita, as Houseboy.
Yeah. I mean, we could kind of. Do you want to save it for when we're talking about the episode proper? Because the character is just a stereotype.
It's, just a stereotype. But John, we can just glance it over further on, but I just wanted to mention, this is probably the only time I'm going to be able to talk about Mr. Miyagi. So I want to give Mr. Miyagi his due and talk about what he starred in. So he started back in the year 1964, John, and he starred in The Queen and I as Barney Cook, Green Acres, The Odd Couple, Hawaii Five-0, MASH, Kung Fu, Sanford and Son as Ah Chu, because of course, stereotypical TV racism in the 70s.
I know, right?
I gotta love it. He starred in Blansky's Beauties, The Love Boat, The Incredible Hulk, Laverne and Shirley, Magnum P.I., and his most memorable TV role in Happy Days as Arnold Takahashi from 1975 to 1983. And honestly, John, I didn't realize Happy Days lasted that long.
Me neither. I was surprised.
I was very much surprised as well. But John, we can't talk about Mr. Miyagi, even though his name's not Mr. Miyagi, but that's how I know him by, without mentioning him playing actual Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid and subsequent sequels.
Yeah, he was in all 4 movies.
Yeah.
Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and then the next Karate Kid, which is not good.
Not good at all. John, but he was also in a little-known Nicolas Cage vehicle in the year 1992. Did you hear of this movie? Did you do research on it?
No, I didn't, but I will welcome any opportunity to bust out my limited fake Nicolas Cage.
Well done, sir. Well done.
I'm more of a Columbo protector.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Edit point. The movie in which I'm talking about, John, is he starred character Mahi Mahi in the movie Honeymoon in Vegas. John, would you like to know a little bit more about this movie?
Isn't this a movie where no, that's Leaving Las Vegas.
That's Leaving Las Vegas, yes.
That's where Nick Cage is a drunk leaving Vegas.
Well, it's a lot more to it, but yes, he's not leaving, he's entering Vegas, but he's leaving life in that film. But that's for another day, another time. Honeymoon in Vegas, John. The premise, Jack loses $65,000 in poker in Las Vegas where he's marrying Betsy. The wedding will have to wait as the poker winner wants the weekend with Betsy to cancel the debt. She accepts. And now, who will she marry, John?
Wasn't this a Robert Redford movie with Demi Moore? Perfect
Yes.
Strangers or something? Where he's just like, I want to pay you $1 million to sleep with your wife?
Pretty much, John. And John, this movie not only carries Nicolas Cage. You know who else is in this movie?
Who else is in this movie, Anthony?
I'm glad you asked, John. Our good friend of the show, Jimmy Caan.
Hey, Jimmy Caan. I don't have a Jimmy Caan.
No. Well, I just wanted to mention because, it's Jimmy Caan.
Yeah,
and that's all I have on that particular film.
Yeah, I have a couple things on Mr. Morita as well. He was in the Bill Cosby Show, but not the Cosby Show.
Yes.
I didn't know Bill Cosby had a show before that.
A show before the show. Absolutely.
A show before the show. You noted Green Acres. That is with Deadweight star Eddie Albert.
Green Acres is the place for me.
I'm moving on to the Bob Newhart Show.
Good call.
Yes, thank you. He had parts in the Bob Newhart Show, along with returning Deadweight star Suzanne Plachette. He was in Welcome Back, Kotter. He had parts in Starsky and Hutch and The Incredible Hulk.
Mentioned.
Yes, thank you. I should have marked them off.
That's okay.
Did you note that he was in episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
I was getting to it, John. But yes, episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Murder, She Wrote. He was in the movie Bloodsport 2.
Oh, that's where Jean-Claude Van Damme leaves, right?
Yes, pretty much.
And funny because we were just talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme today too.
Yes, which is why I want to know to hear that laughter because we were just talking about him. Now, speaking of things he was still in, God, John, the amount of TV this man did is crazy.
He just worked.
And again,
all the time.
Now, I'm talking now, Married with Children, Boy Meets World, Spy Hard. A friend of the show, Leslie Nelson, was in that vehicle.
Agreed.
Family Matters, The Outer Limits, except that it was the 90s version of The Outer Limits, not the way back when.
Yeah.
OG. He was in, and this is what surprised me doing the research, John. He was also the voice of the Emperor in the Disney classic Mulan.
Yeah, and it sounds like they reused his audio in various sequels and video games. That like Kingdom Hearts. It's Pat Morita doing the Emperor when you go to Mulan's world. Yeah,
and that's something. I'm glad you brought that up. Put a pin in that slightly after I finish these next couple things he was in. He was also starred as Mike Grandpa Wu in 96 to 98 in the TV show, Nickelodeon TV show, I should add, The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo. He was in the Hughleys, in the year 2000, Mr. Park. John, he was in Baywatch. Yes, that Baywatch. And John, you mentioned how he starred in the Kingdom Hearts video game as subsequently as the Emperor. Now, Pat Morita did a lot of work after his death in 2004, which I was greatly confused about.
Yeah, it sounds like he must have done a lot of stuff that just took a while to get out into the world.
Yeah.
Or in the case of like Kingdom Hearts, which is just like when you're replaying the story of a Disney movie, they probably just reused his audio.
Yeah, fair enough. But I just thought that very odd. But again, overall,
Agreed.
This is going to be the only time I talk about Pat Morita on the show, probably. So I wanted to give him his due. But moving on to the last one I want to give. And again, this particular actress didn't have much, but she is really great in this episode. So I want to give her a due. And that's Dawn Frame as Audrey in this episode. And literally, she was only in Columbo and the movie The Laughing Policeman as Debbie Martin. Those are like one of the only 2 or 3 roles she starred in.
That kid could have done a lot.
I thought, honestly, John, when I did my IMDb research on her, I thought I was going to have a bunch of things. But no, it was only a small page worth of things. And by page, I'm talking like 5 things tops.
Like, I didn't even think to research her, and that's due in part to me not really being as familiar with the contents of the episode and not really knowing, outside of the main characters who to research. But that young lady really brought her stuff in this episode.
Did. But I'm going to give my thoughts on that later on in the episode.
I'm just saying, this is just me being shocked that she didn't work more.
Yeah, exactly. Now, John, before we transition to Act 1 of our beautiful Season 2 episode, I want to talk about that. The description of this episode is Columbo is determined to make a beautiful young woman's murderer face the music in this thrilling episode written by Stephen Bochco. So Bochco returns as writing this episode, but we have a new director and a new person doing the score, John.
That is correct. On score, doing his first of 23 Columbo episodes, Anthony.
Wow.
Dick Benedictus.
What a name.
What a name, right? He worked from the 70s up to 2010. Notable work included The Rockford Files, Hawaii Five-0, Quincy M.E., where it was murder. The various Perry Mason TV movies that revived the character throughout the 70s and 80s. Jake and the Fat Man, again. We're turning this into the Jake and the Fat Man podcast next. Not really. Because to be honest, we would probably, if I were going to do anything, it would be Diagnosis Murder, where Dick Van Dyke plays a doctor who investigates crimes with his homicide detective son.
Oh my God.
That's kind of just an amazing concept, mostly because I just want to see Dick Van Dyke. He scored episodes of Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, and the Carol Burnett Show.
Now, John, do you think Mr. Benedictus is his first name his first name has to be Richard, right? And Dick's got to be like a nickname, right? Mm-hmm. So do you know, and fun fact for the audience as well, do you know how you get Dick out of Richard?
I don't know. How do you?
You ask him nicely.
Oh, Jesus.
No, but I understand you and our loyal listeners' confusion.
That's me every week. I'd like to talk about our director, Nicholas Colasanto, Anthony.
God, what a last name, too. Colasanto.
But did you know this? Apparently, the rumor is, according to IMDb and Columbo File, is that the bulk of this directing work for this episode was done by Peter Falk and John Cassavetes.
Really?
Yeah, they did uncredited director work. So it's. I think we can question how much Colasanto did. I mean, everybody. Unfortunately, they're all dead. We can't talk about it anymore.
Unfortunately,
but we know that Falk and Cassavetes did some stuff. We just don't know how much they did. It was enough it might not have been enough to warrant their own individual credits, but I know the Directors Guild has weird criteria about pairs and, being a new pair and unestablished and all this nonsense. It's stuff that I don't really know off the top of my head. You'd probably need to look it up. But this is one of two episodes that Colasanto is credited with. He was an actor and a director, Anthony.
Oh, okay.
Acting wise, what was notable for me was a couple things. One was a police comedy called Car 54, Where Are You? Which
I've heard of that.
Yes. You might have heard it courtesy of Hollywood Babylon, because this show starred future Herman Munster, Fred Gwynn.
That's right.
Oh, Lily.
Darn.
That's all I got. He also was in episodes of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, My Favorite Martian, I Spy, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Fugitive, Mission Impossible, Ironside, Medics, The Streets of San Francisco.
But John, did he have a flower in his hair in that show?
Again, still Michael Douglas.
Okay.
He had a part in the Martin Scorsese film starring Robert De Niro, Raging Bull.
Wow.
Yeah, he played a mobster character. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it was a name change from a real life person. So his the character that he's named after isn't a real person. It's just supposed to be somebody else.
Sure.
His last role was that of Ernie Coach Pantuso in Cheers.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and
that's the same guy?
That's the same guy.
Well, I'll be.
Directing wise, he did episodes of Ironside, Hawaii Five-0, Bonanza, Shaft, which I didn't know had a TV show.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I just thought it was a movie.
Fair enough.
He directed episodes of the Streets of San Francisco.
But John, did he have a flower in his hair at that particular time?
No, still Michael Douglas.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry. And Carl Malden. We got to include Carl Malden.
Of course.
He wore a flower on his nose.
Yeah, as one does.
As one does. And he also directed episodes of Chips and Starsky and Hutch.
This man, what a career, John.
Yeah, but to be quite honest, we don't know how much he did on this one.
Yeah, fair enough. But John, what we do know
is that I have some trivia.
Exactly.
Did you know that there's an alternate cut of this episode, Anthony?
What?
Yeah. According to Columbo File and IMDb, because NBC wanted this episode of the season to be a big premiere, they added more time. So this is with commercials, it was a 2-hour movie.
Dang.
Yeah. So they bumped it from the regular 90 and added a whole bunch of added scenes, and it just padded the episode out. So to be honest, I don't know what version we watched. I'm pretty sure we watched the original American broadcast.
Okay.
Now, Dean Hargrove, producer-writer Dean Hargrove, wrote the additional scenes to pad out the episode. And this was last minute. So Bochco had nothing to do with this. And to go back to Bochco, his script is based on a story by Levinson and Link. Now, when this episode broadcast in Canada, Anthony, those additional scenes were cut out, and it was a regular 90-minute episode.
Interesting.
So I don't know how we'll get our hands on that. Maybe that's something, we do some research on, and then farther down the line, we do like a comparison episode or something. I don't know. But there is another version of this episode roaming around somewhere. I just don't know if we watched it or not.
That would be very interesting. And save a pin in that for our final thoughts, John, because what we have to dive into right now is the beginning of Act 1.
And murder.
So, John, Act 1 opens with a man playing piano, quite awfully, in my personal opinion.
I will say this. I don't know if Cassavetes could actually play piano, but maybe, and it is a little bit heavy-handed, but I will say that Cassavetes has the manic genius look down.
Yes,
perfectly.
100%.
The wild hair, that fierce look. He's got great presence.
And then John, from there, talking about looking manic, talking about looking frantic, and all of that, his just acting skills in general, he goes upstairs in the dark and drinks while listening to some classical music.
I mean, I also drink scotch when I'm listening to Beethoven, so it works out.
Oh, okay. There you go. But John, he then opens up some things into a briefcase, including a suicide note?
Yeah, he puts in a pair of gloves, white like opera gloves, and a suicide note. And I will say, I kind of appreciate the silence here. I like that there's no music at this point, and it's just like him really, really being focused on setting up whatever he's trying to do. But I mean, it for me, it was just, I appreciated keeping the attention on him and just watching what he was doing.
Yeah, and again, like it's just a testament to John Cassavetes because he is doing an excellent job with his acting skills right now. But you mentioned you enjoyed the silence, but John, I just enjoyed the classical score. Now, we joked earlier on in the Columbo Files, I can't remember the exact episode where that was the country western Blueprint for Murder, when we were talking about how it sounded like there's just generic, no royalty music. But this one actually felt really well, and I'm gathering that's a testament to Dick Benedictus.
Yeah, and I also think it has to do with the fact that it is properly classical music. So it, and that stuff might not be as tied to, rights litigation as say,
enough.
A proper country western song would have been. But we cut to Cassavetes leaving his house, and it's a hell of a house. And he's also got a Jaguar.
Yes, he does.
He's
Hell of a
clearly
car.
hell of a car. He's clearly living the high life. So he pulls his Jaguar into what looks like a European mechanic shop and does an English accent at the mechanic, which I was trying to figure out why does he do that? Is he just trying to belittle the guy or be on his
I
level?
took it as based on like what he does in the rest of this episode. I took it as just like belittling the guy.
Mhm.
And the guy, the repairman whose name is unlisted.
Actually, it's Mike.
Mike, thank you. I
welcome.
did not list it in my notes. But so Mike, essentially as he sees him pulling in, he even makes a note of like, oh boy, here he is again. So from based off of that and the further actions that he portrays later in this episode, you can just tell that it was, well, in my opinion, he was just kind of just being snooty.
Yeah. So he's leaving his car to be fixed. Apparently, he says something is wrong with it and wants Mike to fix it. It's all part of this setup for whatever his murder plot is. We still don't really know the specifics yet. He's leaving the car until noon tomorrow, and his wife, Janice, comes to pick him up in a Rolls Royce, Anthony.
Yeah, boy. And it's not like a generic Rolls Royce. It is like solid gold, it looks like, John. Like it is just like the mother of all Rolls Royces.
Yeah, they are clearly well off and living high society. Before he leaves, he goes to the bathroom and leaves a window open so he can get back into the auto shop. So he's coming back for his car. We just don't know why yet. Also, I'm pretty sure he and his wife don't wear seatbelts in their Rolls, which is not safe.
No. But I mean, when you're that rich, you you play by your own set of rules.
Yeah, and apparently you fool around in a Rolls on the way to the Hollywood Bowl. So, because that's what the audio made it sound like.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, John, you mentioned they were going to the bowl, which I think it's just referred to as the Hollywood Bowl or just the bowl or whatever. Now, they get to this bowl because apparently it is going to be a fancy orchestra night.
Yeah, and it's going to be televised. And Alex Benedict then takes the opportunity to dismiss his wife, to drop off his tux in his dressing room, and then tell the working class camera technicians, I want this, I want this, I want this. He's clearly someone who thinks himself as superior to the average working class American.
Yes, and that's something we forgot to mention, John, is that, yes, we find out his name is essentially, like we mentioned previously when we talked about John Cassavetes, his character name in this episode is Alex Benedict.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to be, he tells everybody, including his wife, I don't want to be disturbed until the concert.
John, he also tells the security guard who watches over it. Now, maybe it's just me, but I'm watching Carlos, the security guard, and doesn't he just look like a watered-down Charles Bronson?
I mean, a little bit. Like if you molded Charles Bronson in Play-Doh.
Yes.
Just melted it a little bit.
That's exactly what it looks like.
So he has this moment with his wife where, it's a very intimate moment. He's very distracted, but she's very much just like attentive to him. And she clearly loves him, but he's just like, he's trying to get into his headspace to do what he's going to do next. So he dresses up in his tux, gets on. Yes, Anthony.
What does he attach to said fancy conductor tux?
He puts on a very distinct flower in his lapel. He has a boutonniere.
Oh, I wonder if that's going to come up again.
I don't know, but it's a good note to pay attention to. So he puts on his tux, puts on his boutonniere, puts on a raper jacket, and a pair of sunglasses.
Did you just call it what I think you called it?
Yes, I did.
John, I actually liked the trench coat. It was nice.
It was nice. I'm just, Alex Benedict is
being a Benedict.
Yeah, he's been a dick. So I'm going to call his jacket like I see it. So Alex sneaks out of the Hollywood Bowl, gets back to the auto shop to get his car and his murder kit. And he's got the long hair. He's got the sunglasses. He looks suave. He looks handsome for a murderer. I will say that. And surprisingly, not very sweaty for having run all that way from the Hollywood Bowl to the auto repair shop. So we find out that Alex Benedict has a piano playing mistress with a cockatoo, and that is Jennifer Wells, who honestly, when I first saw her, I thought she was like a substitute Linda Carter.
I could see that. I definitely could see that. She does
And
look a lot like her.
Yeah, and she's showing a lot of thigh, and it's a lot of 70s cleavage. The issue between the two of them is this. Jennifer wants to be in a very public relationship with him. She's in love with him. But she's tired of the hiding. She feels that Alex isn't satisfied with Janice's wife, and that she doesn't match him the way that Jennifer does, being that they're both some kind of musical genius when it comes to their respective talents. And Jennifer calls out Alex in a very distinct way. He's afraid of losing the backing of Janice's mother and her money.
Yep.
100%. That is the crux of what Alex is doing. He's not staying. The implication is he's not staying with Janice for love. He's staying for the financial benefit that he's getting out of it.
And essentially, she gives him an ultimatum. You either divorce your wife and we become out and open, or I expose you. So, with those only being his only options, he decides to have her play some Chopin.
After he tells her that he agrees.
Yes.
So he lies to her, plays the Chopin like you say, Anthony, and then what does he do?
He grabs the most 1970s ashtray I have ever seen and will never see again, because ashtrays really aren't a thing anymore, John.
Not really. And he brains her.
Boy, does he ever. But no blood, because of course.
No blood, because, 70s. He leaves the typewritten note that he pulls out of his briefcase in her typewriter to make it seem like she wrote it. And then he leaves her in the kitchen. So he turns on the gas, opens up the oven, and makes it seem like she inhaled enough gas to pass out and then fell and hit her head on the oven door.
Yeah, and then he does this funny, like, I had to share a laugh with it, because he blew out the pilot lights, he sets her body in a specific manner to make it seem like, and then he rolls on top of her body just to indicate, like, okay, yes, if she were to hit her head, she'd be positioned here. And it just made me laugh.
It's just, it's a sinister scene, but it's just like, that's kind of a welcome bit of comedy. But I gotta say, I really love the music right here.
Yes.
I really love the score. And it's something that repeats throughout the episode. It's like this lingering piano where it's just like, dun, 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 and it just like, I probably butchered it, but that lingering piano just like really brought home the music for me. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah. So essentially he, after braining her, after blowing out the pilot lights, after the murder and setting up for an apparent suicide, he leaves the house and tries to sneak his way back to his car.
But did he leave something behind, Anthony?
Well, yes, he did, John. He left behind his most beautiful little flower that he put in his lapel of his tuxedo.
Funny that. Might have to come back to that later.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a thing. Who knows? Maybe.
He also passes a little girl with a dog who might be a possible witness, but we'll put a pin in her story for later. Alex returns to the bowl on time and is back in his dressing room and meets his wife and mother-in-law, Lizzie. And I got to say about Lizzie, she's old school Hollywood, it feels.
Yeah, definitely. She definitely has that old, golden era in cinema feel to her presence in this scene and throughout the episode.
Agreed. Now, Alex and Janice are in the waiting room getting ready for the concert, and his coworker William comes in to tell Alex that Jennifer Wells is late and she's not answering her phone. And Benedict gets really exasperated, very aggressive and angry. He calls the operator, recites Jennifer Wells' phone number by memory, which his wife catches.
Which was a weird jump cut to her. I didn't really appreciate that particular scene. It was one of those like, what did he say?
Yeah, there's probably another take of that would have been a little bit more subtle, I think, where it's just like
I would have loved a more subtle approach to that particular moment.
Like maybe a version of it where it doesn't even have that zoom, because
that's what I'm saying. Like, the zoom just kind of kills what the facial expression she does make, because again, it is a definite thing of her puzzlement and surprise that he just so happens to have this young lady's telephone number completely memorized.
And I, you know what, I agree, because if we don't have that weird zoom in, Blythe Danner gives this great sidelong glance at her husband throughout this scene, and it's just like, it's a perfect moment of, she knows, yes, but she's not 100% sure right now.
100%.
And following the operator saying there's nobody on the line, Benedict makes a big scene about, she's out, cut her out. We're going to do this. They're ready for this. We're not going to deal with her. And we cut to the live broadcast of the orchestral performance.
And John, before we get to the orchestral performance, one last thing I want to talk about the scene of Alex going above and beyond is just, again, I'm going to say it a plethora of times throughout this episode, but John Cassavetes in the scene just, again, it made me feel like this was a real life thing happening. The way he portrayed just this pure hatred and anger and just throwing it all out there on the screen, it was frightening. It was beautiful, to be quite frank, and I very much appreciated it.
Yeah, it really supports how strong I think his acting method was, and the caliber performances he preferred to give out himself. I'm in absolute agreement, Anthony. He is a dynamo in this sequence, but that doesn't translate to his really bad orchestral gestures.
No,
they're bad.
That was pretty bad. Like I'm not huge into being classically musically trained, but I know enough about conducting and tempos to know that he was not really conducting what the tempo should have been based on the song. And again, so he's throwing and flailing his arms around, and then we get this weird freeze scene where he realizes that his flower is no longer on his lapel, John.
Yeah, but there's also another thing that I'd like to discuss is that while the orchestral performance is ongoing, we're mixing the performance with the police coming up to Jennifer's home. And you have the music rising. It's a great touch.
I'm glad you reapproached that, John, because I skipped over my notes, unfortunately. But I just want to say how much I really love the juxtaposition between Alex and his music conducting verse, and then cutting to the police officers going to Jennifer's home, and then the police realizing that something's amiss, and just the cuts back and forth. Columbo, in our previous episodes, they tried doing this a select few times where they do this. Okay, here's the bad guy doing his thing, and here's the murder scene, the police going. But this is one of the few times where it actually hits and it sticks, John, the juxtaposition, that is.
I agree. And to go back into your transition of the freeze frame, I really loved it, mostly because it starts to mix in the orchestra with the screeching of Jennifer's cockatoo as he's discovering the fact, oh God, I've left it there. I thought it was a great way to close out that particular scene.
And John, speaking of closing out particular moments, I think it's time for us to close out Act 1 to introduce ourselves to a certain detective in a certain new season.
With a new friend. So, we're at some kind of doctor's office, Anthony. And yes. Columbo is looking very focused as a doctor hands him a syringe.
Very serious, very focused. Serious. The concert is playing in the background, so you're hearing the orchestral music going. And again, I appreciate the seriousness of the acting that Peter Falk did in this scene. Because again, once we transition to see what's going on, once the camera pans back to the actual scene. It's not something so serious, but again, just in this particular moment, you have a moment of panic with Columbo.
Yeah. And then you find out he's just at a vet's office.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is just like a good little touch of subtle comedy. And this is the first time we see Columbo actually get the call, hey, we got a body.
Yes, 100%. And he is sitting there with Dr. Stereotype of 70s doctors.
Yeah. But I got to say this because I love this. It's just like he tells whoever's on the other line, I'm at the doctor's office. No, it's not serious. I just found that really funny.
It's just great, man. It's great. And we are introduced to Dog.
Dog. Yes, Dog. For those who are new to Columbo, and a reminder to our old hands at Columbo, Columbo has a pet dog that gets named Dog at some point. This is our first introduction to Dog. He's an old, is he a basset hound?
Yeah, I think it's a basset hound. But again, lore listeners listening at home, if we're incorrect, please let us know.
He's just an old dog. He's a good old boy. But Columbo, a recurring gag throughout this episode is that Columbo's trying to figure out a name for this dog.
That's also a recurring gag throughout the entire series, too, whenever a dog makes an appearance.
Yes. So the concert wraps, and we move back to the Hollywood Bowl. And Alex is, very excited because it's just everything went well. It went perfect. It was fantastic. And he learns of the suicide of Jennifer Wells. And we go to the Wells home. And I think this is one of my favorite moments of the show, which is Columbo just looking at the coroner report and looking at the personal photographs and being very frustrated about, all I get from the coroner report is Caucasian, brown hair, female, and then I look at this, and this is all I see somebody full of life, and then I look at, and this is what the department gave me. I just loved how frustrated he was with the fact that everything about this person contradicted the fact that she supposedly committed suicide, and that it was just like this perfect human moment that Peter Falk gave Columbo.
100%, John. And it's also one of the few times that you see Columbo kind of push back against his own department, if you will. Yeah. Which I appreciate, because for the most part throughout the series, Columbo's always, toe in toe with the police, never really speaking too awfully about them unless he's using it as a ruse to off-put somebody he's interviewing. But the fact that, again, just he's really hitting home, like you mentioned, John, all I get is that she's a single white female, Caucasian white female, and just how he's putting that up against just the rich life that she had lived so far, being a musical genius and talking about all the people she was acquainted with, and then just saying, but all I'm getting is white, single female.
He can't comprehend it, and I love that. Now, Dog starts barking, and we learn later that Alex Benedict has arrived. Yes. And he's in his shades. He's in his trench coat. And he's just talking to the sergeant, talking to Columbo. And there's a really cool camera trick.
Yes.
On his sunglasses where he's looking around, and then on both lenses of his sunglasses, there's a quick zoom on the flower boutonniere underneath the piano. And I thought that was it's ridiculous, but it's great. It's a great touch.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciated that touch they did with it. I didn't really see it as ridiculous. It reminded me of a previous episode, which I'm now just slipped my mind. So
Death Lends a Hand.
Death Lends a Hand. Thank you, John. Where we have a similar scene where we're viewing the murder victim getting murdered through the lens of glasses. And it reminded me of that. And it was kind of a nice touch to bring that back.
Yeah, I think I found it ridiculous because it was just that dramatic zoom in the lens was just funny to me.
That's fair enough.
And I think I appreciate this one more than Death Lends a Hand because it's small, but it's clever.
Yeah, it's not
like this big lengthy sequence that Death Lends a Hand had.
And John, after seeing the flower there, Alex takes his coat off and then does this cool little let me pick this up real quick.
Yeah,
Columbo sees that.
Yeah, and comments, "Oh, the pin is bent," and then proceeds to blow smoke up Alec Benedict's ass.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that he picks it up. Columbo instantly sees it, and it's very minor, and you would have missed it if you weren't looking for it. But did you catch the look on Peter Falk's face, Columbo's face, when he turns around and starts to approach Alex and makes the comment like, "Oh, you find something there"?
Yeah, I did.
It was a very subtle, just like, okay, I know this guy. Columbo has already seen the scene. He knows, and Columbo is sharp enough to know like every little nook and cranny of this crime scene by memory, because he's that kind of a person that pays attention to the little things, John.
He needs to have all the details, and that's why he starts grilling Alex about his timeline. Where were you? Were you able to come here? How did you know Miss Wells? And unfortunately, the interrogation's interrupted when Paul Rifkin comes in with all kinds of thunder behind him, being very frustrated and disbelieving that Jennifer Wells committed suicide.
So again, John, we talked about John Cassavetes acting, but again, just James Olson in this scene as Paul Rifkin, just the way he approaches just this distraughtness, this just like, no, I can't believe it. Like, it actually hit home with me. It was 100%, just 100% real. Like, it just felt real, the raw emotion he displayed here.
Yeah, and I think it's just the nature of the performances we're getting, both from Cassavetes and from Falk, to be honest, where it's just like, this feels like it's a real world scenario and with real human emotional reactions.
Yeah. So Alex, playing the ever superhero conductor, tells Paul that he'll talk to him tomorrow. Then he leaves the scene where he is ambushed by reporters.
And that, he mentions to Columbo, he only knew Jennifer Wells as a professional, nothing beyond that. And he had a comment ready to go for the press that, the music world lost one of its great lights and so on, something along those lines. It very just, playing clinical boss. And Columbo also gets chastised after he leaves and goes to his car by the young woman we saw earlier.
Yes,
and we learn her name is Audrey, and she chastises Columbo for keeping dog in his car with the windows up. And Columbo tries to get a little bit more information out of her, but she's sassy.
I just very much appreciated their interaction. Again, this is a common theme with Audrey in this episode, John, is that, again, to which you were surprised she didn't have future work, because she is just giving it to Columbo here.
Yeah, she is giving him the business, and during the giving of the business, Columbo learns that Jennifer Wells would use Audrey to watch her bird, Chopin, who I believe died.
Yes.
Okay.
Due to the poisoning. So. Yeah, due to the carbon monoxide.
I thought so, but it was kind of maybe hindsight's 20/20, but I thought it was a little unclear for some reason.
Yeah, fair enough. But John, what was very clear is Alex drives home and instantly has a confrontation with his wife, Janice,
who is like half asleep, but really concerned about what her husband's relationship was with Jennifer Wells. And again, I got to bring up the score because that lingering piano just does it for me. It's great here. It's really great.
Yeah, it really makes the scene, really makes the conversation. And Janice confronts Alex about the memorized telephone number. Alex bats away the suspicion in general and smooths it completely over.
Which I'm glad you brought up, because I want to jump back a little bit just to the murder of Jennifer Wells, where there's a line there that Alex says, "Never trust your womanly intuition. It's never right." And he does the same thing here to his wife. He's making her doubt her instincts. He's gaslighting her.
Yeah, 100%. Just to show the narcissist he truly is, John.
Yeah, and he said, everybody assumes that they know who he is and what he's like, that he's leaping to beds all over town, which he refutes. But, he's able to smooth over the situation with his gaslighting. And we come to the next scene where Columbo is starting what I called his gremlin phase in this episode. Because, boy, what Columbo does in this episode, I just freaking love it. Because he just is assaulting Alex Benedict's life like a gremlin, and I love it.
Absolutely. So Columbo shows up to the house the next morning and rings the doorbell. And who greets him, John?
Pat Morita.
Mr. Miyagi himself.
As the most stereotypical Asian butler you can imagine.
Yep, 70s television, I'll tell you. So
the pits.
Mr. Miyagi takes him in, calls Alex's name, and that's the last you see of Pat Morita.
Yep.
Now, I like the interaction, like you mentioned, John, that Columbo really starts to pick at Alex here.
And we also get something that, and maybe this is partly Peter Falk playing with his friend John Cassavetes. Columbo goes all over the place when he's talking to Benedict. It's like, I came here to talk to you about something. I wanted to talk to you about something. I forgot to tell you something. Oh, look at that living room. Isn't this nice? What do you make here? This is like 40 feet, right? Oh, that's fantastic. Now, wait, I'm getting off track. Well, I needed to talk to you about something. That's the kind of conversation he has all the time with Benedict.
Yeah, and amongst this conversation, John, he's trying to guess at the income of Alex, and he tells Alex that he makes $11,000 a year, John.
That's, oh my God.
Now, John, as I love to do whenever money and salary is brought up off of our beloved show, Columbo, I like to convert that into $2020.
All right, lay it on me.
In 2020, John, Columbo, due to inflation, would be an estimated earning of $68,494.74 in 2020 dollars.
And that's before taxes.
And that's before taxes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what Columbo's trying to do here is just really get a lay of the land as to what Alex Benedict's life is like. And Columbo, ballparks how much Alex Benedict paid for the house. And he there's a line that he says, I'm fascinated by money. It's just like, that's hilarious.
It was just such a great interaction, John.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this might be one of the scenes that was added to pad for time. And I say that because ultimately this kind of goes nowhere, because he asks Alex Benedict for an autograph, and that thing never comes back up again.
Right. So, yeah, like I said, it definitely had that feel to it.
Yeah, and I also note that, and I believe IMDb pointed this out, John Cassavetes has a haircut in this scene.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, that's what makes me think this is one of the added scenes that had to be added in, filmed later, and Cassavetes had already cut his hair.
Oh my gosh, how funny.
But we get this scene. The Pat Morita scene and the scene at the Benedict house is, it's a good interaction between Columbo and Benedict, but ultimately it feels very superfluous.
Yeah, no, ultimately, and especially because the next scene kind of really digs into the nuts and bolts of Columbo establishing alibi, establishing reason, rapport, etc. Yeah. And the scene we're talking about, folks at home, is Columbo shows up to the car repair shop apparently later that day or the next day. It's not really determined.
And he's just already there, like a gremlin in the car. Before Benedict even shows up, he's there. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, and he's like messing with the steering wheel. He's just touching everything inside of there. And Alex is of the phase where he's like, okay, I can't really light him up yet, even though I'm obviously perturbed about this particular instance.
Yeah, so, and he and Columbo have a conversation on how Columbo is being really bothered by the fact that this vibrant young woman committed suicide. It doesn't make sense. She seemed to have the life that she always wanted. Why would she throw it away? Which Benedict would then goes to write off as, it's a typical thing amongst creative types. They go up and they go down and they go up and they go down, and sometimes they just stay down.
John, just the face that Columbo was giving Alex as Alex is spinning this obviously really dumb yarn is just amazing, because he's like, look, I got you, buddy. You might as well just tell me you killed her.
Almost. He's it's like a horse and a carrot. He's just like, come on, I know, come on. You want to tell me, come on.
Absolutely.
And Columbo notes that the blow on the head could have come from anything, maybe a person. And I just love that he just goes off on these sudden tangents, and it's just like, he's talking to Benedict, and then mid-sentence, it's like, look at that car. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, definitely just trying to throw Alex off of his game for sure.
And we go to a conversation about Chopin, the bird. And Columbo goes on to say, it takes a lot of effort to love a bird, to get it to stay, to get it to take care of it. Why wouldn't she save it?
Yeah.
And he notes that suicide notes, they're usually handwritten, not typed. And then Benedict goes on to say, she typed everything. And like a hawk, Columbo says, how do you know that?
Yeah. Just swoops down. Like, it was amazing. Just that twist. Boom.
Yeah. And he did and Benedict's explanation is this, that she had lousy handwriting and that even she couldn't read. And anything that he got from her, like rehearsal notes or so on, were always typed because that made it easy.
Yeah, again, some other just dumb yarn that he is attempting to string Columbo along with.
It's like, it's convincing to a point, but if you start picking at it, the holes become obvious.
Yeah, exactly. And then so Alex gets his car, he leaves, and then Columbo has a very funny interaction with the car mechanic, Mike.
I think the engine is missing. This is like about his Peugeot.
Yeah.
Just like,
and I love how Mike's like, well, I work on foreign cars. And Columbo goes, yeah, this is a foreign car. And Mike's like, well, he takes a hard look into the engine and goes, have you thought about getting a new car?
But I mean, Columbo is just doing a roundabout way to figure out why Benedict left the Jaguar at this auto shop.
Yeah.
And it's out, from what Columbo gets from Mike, it sounded like a superfluous reason. And he also learns that client cars get left in the garage. The cars for sale get left outside. So something might be amiss here.
And speaking of things that feel amiss, John, the scene
Anthony.
jumps to Janice having dinner with her mom. And now I'm glad you mentioned earlier about how there was stuff filmed to pad the episode.
Yes.
To make it to that 2 hours. I felt like this scene was nothing but padding, and I was lost throughout it. Again, I was, having dinner while watching it, so I was doing a few other things, but just I felt like this scene didn't have quite a point.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I feel like it's more a scene to get a better glimpse as to what Janice's relationship is with her mother and what her mother is like, because Lizzie is very much a controller. She is trying to shift the narrative away from the fact that Jennifer Wells committed suicide, so they're going to open up a scholarship in her name. And Janice really wants to understand who Jennifer Wells was, and her mother's just like, it's, they're not like us, it doesn't matter. And then proceeds to order for her daughter. So I agree that this scene might be padding. I don't think it's as obvious as padding as that Columbo Benedict conversation where Pat Morita is in. But no, I agree. The only value here is that we get a little bit more between Janice and her mother.
Yeah, but again, I mentioned the padding, John, because then we're introduced to just two characters. I think they're like, they sit on the board of the orchestra, and again, just two random characters that they have a back and forth with the mother. And I was like, okay, can we just get to the next scene? Because the next scene is instantly with Columbo or Alex showing up to the orchestra bowl and Columbo playing chopsticks on the piano. And I was like, that last scene we just watched didn't really kind of fit with this transition here, guys.
No, yeah, I agree. And honestly, this conversation at the bowl is another one of the highlights of the episode.
Oh, 100%.
Because Columbo, again, acting as the gremlin, is just there waiting for Alex Benedict. And he's just like, how did you know to find me? Or not many people would know to find me.
Oh, I love John Cassavetes' snark in the beginnings of this back and forth. Again, he's just giving Columbo a round of applause for playing chopsticks. He's like, yes, I haven't heard chopsticks since I was a little boy.
Yeah, I know. And And Columbo just says, oh, I called your wife and she told me you'd be here. It's just like, oh, what? I doubt he even called her, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And the scene is here, John, for Columbo to explain to Alex about Jennifer's typewriter.
Yes. And Columbo explains how the typewriter is essentially working and how if you need to type over something again, it's never going to be 100% exact. Because it's not a computer processor that can reset you back to absolute zero every single time. It's a typewriter is subject to human error. So what Columbo is theorizing is that somebody typed the note out, took it out of the typewriter, and then put it back in to make it look like somebody had simulated somebody typing it. And this is Alex telling Columbo this theory, and Columbo agrees with it. So Alex is telling on himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Columbo thinks that the note was typed by whoever killed Jennifer Wells.
And John, I love this next particular moment of this scene where Columbo uses Alex as an example.
I'm not saying you did it. Not saying you did it. But as an example, it's great. I love what Columbo does here. It's absolutely just a masterclass of just chess maneuvering.
Yeah. And it intrigues Alex because Alex thinks he knows it all and thinks he's better than Columbo. So Alex gets drawn back into the conversation, and Columbo essentially lays out minute for minute the plan that Alex used to murder Jennifer.
Yeah, and even just calls out, it's not that far from your auto shop to here. You could have made it. And he notes that the Jaguar has an increase in mileage because auto shops have to note the mileage when the car comes in. And there is a 9-mile discrepancy. There's 9 extra miles. And Benedict then plays off the extra mileage as, the mechanic just taking it around the block for a test drive.
And Columbo's just not having it. He's like, nope, but nobody remembers doing that.
Yeah, and Benedict is just literally just trying to pay it off. It's just like, of course they're not going to remember it. They took a client car out. No one's going to. They're not going to say crap because they don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, and then this is when Alex really starts getting defensive. He starts huffing and puffing about all of this will never hold up in court, and he starts to walk away. And then Columbo hits him with, "Well,
there's one more thing."
Exactly. He's like, "Well, I wasn't able to convince you that this was a murder, but good news, I was able to convince my superiors that this is not a murder, or that this is not a suicide, it's a murder, and that's my specialty, homicide."
Great line. Great line. As we close out Act 2, Anthony, and get into the final act.
So, post-bowl orchestra, John, Columbo shows up to a jazz club where Paul is playing.
Yeah, and, he has a very tense conversation with Paul, Columbo does. And Paul cuts through Columbo's story very quick because Columbo says he went to a cigar shop upstairs. They didn't have a match, so he came down here. There was a laundromat upstairs. There's no cigar shop. It was a cigar shop, but it's not anymore.
Yeah, that's what I like. Columbo's like, well, it was. He's trying to be friendly. He's trying to get Paul to talk to him. He's like, well, it used to be a cigar shop, which is just an excellent little Peter Falk additive line. Like, I felt like that wasn't even written in the script. That's just Peter Falk just adding to it, improvising. It was excellent.
Yeah. So the crux of what Columbo is doing at this jazz club, he wants to figure out why Paul is so certain that Jennifer Wells didn't kill herself. Because everyone else is so convinced of suicide, but not him. Why?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Just like I figured. Paul and Jennifer Wells were in a relationship for, this is later information, but for 3 months prior to her murder, she left him when she found somebody new. But she would let him see him on the side, and would not tell him who he was, this new person. But whoever this new person was somebody that she thought was going to take her to the stars and beyond. Was going to elevate her like nobody has ever elevated her before.
Yeah, and so Paul tells him this begrudgingly, and essentially is shoving Columbo away, not wanting to answer. And I love that Columbo just shows his frustration to not only Paul, but he shows his frustration to the audience because he's asking for the name of the other man. Paul's like, "Oh, I never asked." And Columbo, just out of pure frustration, hits him with, "Oh, sure, the man who's seeing a girl never asked about the name of the other man," and just throws that snark to slap Paul in the face and just like shakes his head and just leaves the scene.
Yeah, and it's such a weird, tense scene, but I'm glad you brought up what Falk did, because to be honest, that the snark didn't catch me as much. It was more like Columbo just trying to be polite to somebody who is really hurting. But I could definitely see your take on it.
See, I understand what you're trying to say, but that to me, with the theme you tied up earlier, when he's going through, okay, the police are only giving me she's single, white, young female. But look at her life. Look at all of this. There's no way she could have committed suicide. And then bringing it forward to the one man who actually showed the emotion and couldn't believe it. And he's sitting here saying, like, look, I know she didn't kill herself. I'm trying to solve this.
Mm-hmm.
And then just juxtapose that with Paul not giving him information, just his frustration, because he's like, look, I know, Columbo, that is, I know she didn't kill herself. I am trying to actively solve the murder of this person you so cared about. And you're giving me nothing because, oh, sure, the man who's seeing a girl never asked the name about the other man.
That's a fantastic explanation, Anthony. And clearly you picked up a lot more than I did in this scene.
Oh, it was just a great scene overall, John. But the scene ends, and the next scene begins with Columbo showing up to Alex's house yet again, and he starts speaking with Janice.
After a lot of tennis shoe leather.
So much tennis. Way too much tennis.
And I will note that Columbo politely waits for the game to finish.
Yeah.
That's very kind of her.
And as he's politely waiting, John, he notices that there is some beautiful flowers growing in her little flower garden.
I'm glad you mentioned flowers, Anthony. Something kind of drove me crazy. They looked familiar.
Gosh, they did.
Do you know why they looked familiar?
I'm not 100% sure, John. But Columbo.
I'll tell you why.
Tell us, John.
I knocked over some crap on my desk. Apparently, Janice, even though the Benedicts have a gardener, Janice works particularly on the flowers when she can, and she specially grows a certain type of carnation to put on Alex's lapels when he performs.
Yep.
And following that bit of information, we have a somewhat of an awkward conversation between Columbo and Mrs. Benedict, because Columbo essentially plants the seeds of doubt in Janice's head that maybe her husband hasn't been exactly forthcoming with the reality of his relationship with Jennifer Wells.
Yeah, and so she's getting hit with these facts. She's obviously upset over this, and this is where Alex enters the scene, and Janice just like, I bid you good day, Columbo, and like just storms back off to the house. And Columbo's talking with Alex saying, I didn't really mean to make her upset. Please apologize for me.
Yeah, and then we go into more gaslighting.
Yeah.
Because Alex and
God, what a prick, John. Like, literally, in my notes, I put, what a prick. He literally tells her, oh, come on, give me a smile.
Yeah, and I'm so tired of your insecurities.
Yeah.
It's honestly, I think what Benedict is doing here is a textbook example of a gaslighter.
Yeah.
He's constantly manipulating his wife. And I would say that the interaction we do get with him and Jennifer Wells counts, but we don't get enough with her to kind of really have a firm accounting of it. But the way Janice deserved so much better than being treated like that, and let alone like that by such a prick.
Yeah. And so that scene comes to an end, and while it ends in just frustration for me personally, just seeing that happen, the next scene just lightened my spirit almost instantly, John.
Yeah, because we cut to Columbo going to a little ballet class, and he's meeting Audrey. And me personally, I'm wondering, why isn't he asking her parents to talk to her? But that's just the lawyer in me saying, wait a minute.
Yeah. And I love the tit for tat they have. I love it. At one point, Columbo's trying to butter her up to get her to speak about what she saw and everything. And he goes, I'll tell you, I'm very impressed with you. And she instantly, John, not even a hiccup, hits him with, oh, is it my body or my mind? Just, I died. I was like, yes.
Hilarious.
Yes.
It's just like this 10-year-old is like giving like Thin Man Nora Charles level snark right back at Columbo, and he's not even ready for it.
No, she actually, I think honestly, it's the only time, well, maybe Goldie and Blueprint for Murder, but just where Columbo is just definitely off of his game and he just doesn't know what to do.
I'm inclined to agree. She goes on to tell him that she saw a man in a tuxedo and that she saw him at Jennifer's repeatedly and that he was there the day of the murder and left shortly before she was found. So whoever this man in the tuxedo is, he's likely the killer.
Yep. So Columbo instantly thinks like, okay, this is the proof I have to finally nail Alex. So in the next scene, he brings Audrey to the place where Alex is recording sound for a documentary, like a World War II documentary or something.
And the music, I gotta say, the score for this documentary makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't understand what was going on. It was just like the scene is just people like marching down a street, but this is like epic wartime song going on. Like, I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, and it's like Nazi Germany. Why are you giving like this rousing score to footage of Nazi Germany? It makes no sense. We also get the great conducting again by John Cassavetes.
God. Just like, man, boy, John, you had to go there.
It's bad. So Columbo, again, the gremlin to Alex Benedict, is bugging him again and has Audrey point out who she saw, but she doesn't point out Alex Benedict, Anthony. She points out Paul Rifkin.
Which I really loved this, this complete 180 to where you think this was going. I love the being blindsided by it because instantaneously you're like, okay, I've seen enough episodes of Columbo. I know she's going to point out Alex. I know that this is going to, lead to Columbo as another piece of evidence and yada, yada. But she slowly, and then the camera slowly pans from Alex and goes to Paul. And just the directorial etiquette of this scene was fantastic.
Absolutely. And from this, we go to the board meeting for the orchestra. And Lizzie is there. The two gentlemen from earlier are there. Some two other women are there who I believe aren't named. But they're discussing Paul. And they're trying to figure out, what do we do? He's been accused of murder. He's unsavory. He's grouchy. He's grumpy. We should get rid of him. And then in comes Alex Benedict to defend Paul.
Here he comes to save the day.
Because he's guilty for what he did, or he feels guilty. I'm trying to figure out why he did what he did. Was it out of genuine friendship, or was it just an attempt to give himself more cover?
It was to give him more cover, John, because if he was actually truly trying to advocate for Paul, he wouldn't have mentioned his prior assault on a woman.
He punched a woman in the face apparently for some reason, which we learn later. And I gotta say, I loved Mryna Loy in this scene because she's pulling out all of the Nora Charles repartee and holding her own against smart mouths.
Oh yeah, 100%. You can tell she owns that boardroom. She's like, "Look, you're my conductor, but I'll get rid of you. Like, don't mess with me, boy."
Yeah, and that's further established in the subsequent scene to the board meeting where Lizzie is meeting with Paul and Columbo. And Paul comes out and says that he was full-fledged in love with Jennifer and was in between her trysts with this new mystery man. She would still come back to him and still, initiate a relationship. And he came back the day she was murdered to try and win her back. But we learned that she didn't answer. So by the time he had gotten there, Benedict had came and left, and she was already dead.
Yeah, 100%, John. And then this is, so essentially Mrs. Mother-in-law, as I like to refer to her as, she says, Paul, okay, look, but while this thing is blown over, you're suspended, but we're going to still keep you on salary. So just till this is completely blown over. So he gives his thanks. Paul leaves the scene, and Columbo talks to her about anybody getting the axe. And John, this was a great moment.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up because earlier in the conversation with Paul before dismissing him, she mentions that, aside from my daughter, this orchestra is my baby. And if anyone tries to hurt my orchestra or my daughter, they're out. They get the axe. And Columbo asks her to elaborate that because when she said that, Columbo has a light bulb go off.
Yes.
And it's a lot better than the light bulb he did in Blueprint for Murder.
Yes. It was great. It's one of those, like, it clicks. Okay, now I have motive. And it's funny, John, and I mentioned that this is great because he's asking her, he's like, did you mean anyone? Yes. Even Alex? Especially Alex. You know what? Can I have that drink now? Like a celebratory drink.
It's amazing. And Columbo, the scene ends with Columbo getting his drink. I hope he enjoyed it. We're back with Columbo and Dog at the vet's office because he had to have a follow-up. And the Benedict concert is running again. It's the same one that ran the day that Jennifer Wells was murdered.
Because, John, it's on tape. I never would have thought of that.
It's on tape. I never would have thought of it. It's on tape. I can't believe it.
And boy, how far we have come as a society from 72 to now. Because now everything is taped. Anything you see on PBS or any station, you're like, oh yeah, this has already been uploaded to YouTube or Facebook or any other social media platform of your choice. And it's like, just the fact that Coleman's like, oh my God, I never would have thought about this being taped. I'm like, oh my God. I really had a moment where I was like contemplating how society has evolved in like from 72 to now.
It's a hell of a thing, isn't it?
Right. Oh my gosh.
So Columbo is back at the bowl while Alex and a bunch of others, including Janice, are in the middle of some kind of rehearsal. And
boy, John, the I got you big boy smile that Columbo is giving off is fantastic.
Absolutely. And there's some interaction that he has with Mrs. Benedict, Janice, and she's a little cold based, in part due to how we left them the last time they interacted. But Columbo tells the Benedicts, I have something I want to show you in the TV booth. You won't see me after this. We're going to be done after this, you and I, but I need you to see this. So Columbo takes the Benedicts into the control room and asks the Frank or whoever, I can't remember his name, the guy manning the TV to replay the tape. And we look at Alex Benedict live at the first performance of his orchestra series. And the closing shows there's no lapel on his jacket, Anthony.
Well, there's a lapel, but there's no flower on the lapel.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I don't know how to use words, apparently. There's no flower on his lapel, Anthony, but wait, hold on. Didn't we learn from Janice that he always wears that specific flower on his lapel every time he performs?
Oh, what?
So where's the flower?
And that's what Columbo's asking. And Alex, in his ultimate narcissist snootiness, goes, okay, I just didn't wear a flower that night.
Then we go to TV reporting, live footage of Alex Benedict leaving the Wells house, talking to the press. And oh, look, there's a flower on the lapel. So why put it on after the concert?
I was just confused. I guess I did it in my confusion.
And you know what this reminded me of? Jack Cassidy looking at his mail.
Yep. 100%. 100%, John. Same kind of vibe.
Same kind of vibe. It's like, why would you put on a boutonniere if you're distraught? That's the last thing you're going to worry about. And Janice now realizes, oh, he killed her. And there was more going on. And she confirms that there's no flower on at the time he left to go to the Wells house.
And then, John, honestly, the way this ends, and I'm taking a more serious tone because from the moment where he realizes that Janice isn't going to give him that alibi, he instantly hears her say that, sees her, and then he instantly holds her in an embrace. And again, this is just a sweet, sweet moment because he knows his life is over. And again, this is John Cassavetes at his best. He knows his life is over. He knows that he's been bested. And so his ego automatically gets tossed out of the door. He's now becomes just this barren soul, this bear of a man. And he's holding her and he's like, I just want to let you know, obviously I'm guilty. You know that, but I've always loved you and I will always love you. And it was just like an actually sweet and tender moment.
Yeah, it was absolutely just this human moment where he realized how bad he screwed up. It's just like, I shouldn't have done this to her. I shouldn't have done this to us.
Yeah.
And also, there's a couple more things at the end of this. You know, he has this conversation with Columbo, and just essentially just drops all of the pretense of snark and disrespect, and it's just like, you know, he calls Columbo for what he is. He calls him a genius, and he says, "Goodbye, genius."
Yeah, just instantly humbled. Talking to Columbo, you suspected me from that very first time we met with the lapel with the flower,
and Columbo doesn't even say that he does, but it's just he doesn't need to. It's like, yeah, I had you from jump.
Yeah, and again, after that conversation, like, I'll see you around, genius. He's like, it's like he goes in and he addresses his troops, and then because he talks to the gentleman behind the camera or with the roll of film, he talks to the orchestra. He's like, okay, gentlemen, thank you, and goodbye.
And then he does this like salute with the conductor stick to Janice, and we get again that little piano lingering
and a wink too. Don't forget the wink, man.
Yep, you're right. And I gotta say, there's one as we close out this act before we get to the closing of our own act. There's a moment between Janice and Columbo that I found really touching, and it's this little hand grasp that Columbo does, just you know, as a little, just a consolation. It's just like, I'm sorry, this happened to you. You didn't deserve this.
It reminds me of a later Columbo episode where he does a similar thing to the murderer who performs a murder, but she is pretty much set to die because of a deathly illness. I'm trying not to spoil the episode, even though it's been out for all these years now. And I know
which one you're talking about.
Yeah, and essentially he does the same kind of hand holding, this sad, like, yeah, it's over, and I'm sorry I had to do this to you. And it's just a very, honestly, John, and we did a whole episode dedicated to just Peter Falk himself, but only Peter Falk could honestly portray that sad yet warm moments. The sorry, but I had to, and mean it 100%.
And that, I think that's the key of it, is that it feels genuine. Yeah. That it is not, you know, at the end of the day, we're just watching people perform a story, but the way Falk approaches acting is that, you know, he means what he's doing.
Yeah.
And his interaction with Columbo's interaction with Janice here is a perfect example of that. So, and then the episode closes, and I think, Anthony, it's that time for our final thoughts in our segment titled Just One More Thing.
And just one more thing.
John, my one more thing, my final thoughts of tonight's episode is, again, we just recently talked about it, but God almighty, the ending was superb.
Yeah. Like, I have a lot of highlights in this episode. The ending is one of them. That interaction with Columbo and Benedict at the ball with chopsticks and the typewriter.
Yeah.
the auto shop, that's an all-timer as far as I'm concerned. But I think, without knowing who the absolute director is, I think, knowing that Falk and Cassavetes had a hand in this in some way is not surprising based off of how much, discussion we're getting out of the humanity that Benedict has and Columbo has
right
in this episode.
And that's honestly my second point, is that just the chemistry, John, between Cassavetes and Falk. Like, you could tell that they continue, like they had a chemistry coming into it, and then that you can tell that they were just great friends off screen too. Like,
I think that's when Columbo honestly works best, is when Peter Falk is 100% comfortable in who he's playing against. We get that in Cassavetes, and I wish he came back more.
Yeah, honestly, 100%.
I don't recall if he directs any more Columbo episodes. I think he might, but I mean, I would put him up there with Patrick McGoohan, because McGoohan does the same caliber of stuff, even though, some of those episodes are a little bit more convoluted, but it just feels like we're watching a live interaction of people moment to moment. And that, I think, I feel like Cassavetes just put in his preference of acting style, and it just bled throughout this episode.
Now, John, speaking of preferences of how to end an episode, can we get your preference of ending our season 2 series opener, as only you can?
Of course, Anthony. Good listeners, this has been another fine file, I should say, and a stunning debut to our new season of the Columbo Files. I have been your co-host, John Soares, and on behalf of my podcast brother, the man, the myth, the booty, the legendary Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Peter Falk, and you've been listening to an episode of the Columbo Files, hosted by the Ludic Lounge. And just one more thing. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Ludic Lounge, Anthony at RojoLoco44, and John at just_John_0891. Or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com.